Today on The State of Us, the coddling of American children is a boon to Beijing. Welcome to The State of Us. I'm your host, Justin T. Weller, joined, of course, today by the one and only friendly redneck liberal and senior resident historian here at True Chat, Mr. Lance L. Jackson. We've got an interesting piece today from the Wall Street Journal, an opinion about how in China, the author's son had to study hard. Here in the U.S., he just needs to bring a healthy snack to school. So we're going to be looking at the points that are brought forward in this piece, which is entitled "The Coddling of American Children is a Boon to Beijing," and discuss if China's children are tough, what does that make America's children? Well, we're going to find out. But before we do, Lance, we couldn't get started if we don't know what the word of the day is.
Well, the word of the day is not a difficult one. It's a one-syllable word, 4 letters, but I think it's one that's misused and is one of the most frustrating words in our language today for me, and it is the word fair, F-A-I-R. Now, it has multiple meanings in my dictionary here. It has close to 17 different definitions along with 5 different synonym definitions. But I think for today, what I'm going to read you is number 6 is just and honest, impartial, unprejudiced. Specifically free from discrimination based on religion, sex, or race, etc. And the synonym, the general word fair, implies the treating of both or all sides alike without reference to one's own feelings or interest. And the word just implies adherence to a standard of rightness or lawfulness without reference to one's own inclinations. So many people, well, that's not fair. Based on what? What you want? That's not the definition of the word. Okay? I'm reading it. I've read all the definitions. I've read the synonyms. Nowhere in here does it say that fair is based on what your feelings and emotions are. It's more of a legal term. So when people say, well, it's not fair, based on what? Just because you don't like it? Is there a legal point, or is it race or gender? Then that fits the definition. If it's just not fair because somebody got a bigger lollipop than you did, not sure that's the way the word's supposed to be used. So there you have my old man rant for the morning. Okay. Fair. I'm not sure about fair. Okay. Nobody ever told me anything was supposed to be fair. They said, if you want something, you go work for it. If somebody else is working for it, you need to work harder than that.
Well, and
that's fair.
And I think there's something to be said too.
Sometimes you work hard and you don't get what you want.
We've distorted, again, just an opinion here, but we'll see what our listeners think. You can send us an email, podcast@thestateofus.org. I think this is part of the root of what we're talking about today. We've somehow distorted in this country the difference between equal opportunity and fairness, right? Because, for example, in Lance's scenario he brought up here, there's one person and they're handed a larger sucker and the other person's handed a small sucker. Well, that's not fair. Well, who said it was going to be fair? Now, why did they get the suckers? Well, let's say they were playing a game, right? And the first person came in first and they got the big sucker, and the second person came in second and they got the little sucker. Well, that's not fair. Okay, but you had an equal chance, right? You were given the opportunity. You didn't succeed at the opportunity. Well, that's not fair that person has nicer things than I do. Okay, well, what have they done differently to get it? And that's, I guess, the point that I'm getting at is we've convinced ourselves that we have a right to fairness. And we're really not, to your point, Lance, we're not talking about fair. We're saying that, well, we have a right for everybody to be equal, to get things equal. So if one person gets a Lamborghini, then everybody should have a Lamborghini. And I think what we've confused is that you have the right to be equal in opportunity. That doesn't mean you have the right to be equal in what you get. because opportunity, right? That's our lovely old expression. And you can say this about potential as well. That'd be another more common phrasing, but the argument goes, right? If you have opportunity in one hand and doo-doo in the other hand, which one weighs more? Well, it's pretty easy, right? Opportunity is only as good as what you do with it. It has no value in and of itself. And somehow we've taken 2 or 3 steps from that and said, well, we really don't care if we have the same opportunity because everything should be fair regardless of the opportunity that we have. And I think that's part of what this article is hinting at.
Well, and we don't also, I think, and just to add to that, because I agree with what you say, but to add to that, we don't all have the same skill sets. So that's like, when I went to the Major League tryout camp.
You mean that we can't all be nuclear physicists, Lance?
And I mean, because all I wanted to do was play professional baseball. I wanted to pitch professional baseball. And I took the opportunity and went to a tryout camp. And my fastball clocked out at 82 miles an hour. And the scout said, sorry, son, you don't throw hard enough. We're not going to bring you back for the second day of camp.
I thought there was another line in there about how he said, now throw your fastball.
Well, yeah,
and
I
then
told
he said,
that
is
before,
my
right?
fastball.
That is, right. And he just kind of shook his head at me and marked my name off his chart, and I picked up my stuff and went home. But the point is, I could have stood there on the mound and said, well, that's not fair. I want to play just as badly as everybody. I want to play more than these guys who are throwing 95. They don't really care. They just have God-given ability, or something's touched down and graced their shoulder and they can throw 12 miles an hour faster than me. And they don't even care because they don't really even like baseball. I love it. I want to do this. That's not fair. Okay. And then I could just be laying in my bed for the last 40 years living in mom's basement. And, that wasn't fair. I didn't get to do what I wanted to do. And the point is, okay, so I didn't get what I wanted. So now what opportunity am I going to go get? People do have different skill sets. People are blessed with different abilities. And so therefore, we can't be equal on that. But what do you do with what you have? I think that's the key.
So the article uses as an illustration that the author is a Chinese doctoral student raising a young son in the U.S., and I thought this part was interesting. The first day he came home, referring to the son, came home with a sheet of math homework, 35 addition problems. He finished in about a minute. On the second day, he was asked to write 328 in different configurations. So he wrote down 300 plus 20 plus 8 following the prompt, and then 164 times 2, 82 times 4, and 656 divided by 2. My son is not a genius, but he started studying math at an early age. When he was 5, I taught him fractions. 2 years later, I introduced him to algebra. It is a core belief in Chinese society that talent can be trained, so schools should be tough on children. Chinese students scored the top of international math and science tests, and, no surprise here, the reason this example was brought up, this is not a philosophy shared by American schools. On Friday night, my son came home announcing in bewilderment that he didn't have any homework. In China, students tend to receive twice as much homework on the weekend, given the 2 days to complete it. How will America compete with a China determined to train the best mathematicians, scientists, and engineers?
Great point.
How will we, Lance?
I don't know.
What can you do for us?
Well, I don't think we will.
Oh, okay.
I think people need to start learning how to speak Mandarin.
Oh.
You don't speak Chinese. There are different dialects of Chinese, Mandarin being one of the largest. Because folks, it's not just going to happen. Either that, or luckily we do have some of the people here in the United States, some students in the United States who do like math, who will work hard, who will do these things and be our scientists and our mathematicians and our engineers, because they have a proclivity for this type of learning, or they have a desire to do those things. They have a work ethic to do those things, because not everybody in China is a mathematician, a scientist, or an engineer. They have a lot of people working in factories as well. But I think our point of today's show is they're doing those things with everybody and then giving everybody the opportunity. Isn't that fairness? Whereas we're not giving all of our students that opportunity. We're saying, well, this is too hard. We're not going to do this. We want you to go out and play. We don't want you to do all this homework. Nobody said you can't play, right? I mean, who says there's something wrong with teaching? You need to sit down and do your homework for 45 minutes or an hour every night and then go out and play. A lot of time after 3 or 4 o'clock to do multiple things. Oh, wait a minute. I just said go outside and play. Nobody does that anymore. You can go to your gaming system and play. You can go to your virtual reality machine and play after you've done your hour's worth of homework.
The article states, Chinese education pushes the young in directions that serve the party and the state. Youth are trained to be skilled laborers, ready to endure hard work and brutal competition. Such political indoctrination is taught side by side with math and science. American education is supposed to be about opening minds, but appears not to fill them with much. Worse, young Americans are not prepared for the demands of being an adult.
Bingo, right there, right? Number one job as a society and as a parent is to raise your children to be a good, strong adult.
And the question becomes, if other countries are doing this and we're not, where does that leave us when our children are graduating, right? And becoming adults, whether or not they're ready to be. We're pushing them out there and saying, well, you're an adult now. What was the difference between being 17 years old and 11 months and being 18 years old? Well, the difference is that now we say you're an adult, but are you ready to be an adult? And compared to other people around the world, often you're less ready. So it sounds like what China does is just great. I mean, we should probably just copy it, right? Just one for one.
Wait a minute. It kind of sounds like what we used to do here in the United States when I was in school.
And then, okay, interesting. So we did it.
Yes.
And we quit doing it. And then China said, we would like to be in charge. Okay. And now they're working hard. Okay.
They're right. They're just copying us because we use this as a blueprint to become a world leader. And then we got to that stage and we're saying, we need to soften up because we really don't want to make our children work that hard. But we still want to be a world leader.
So what does that mean for the future of American children, future of our country? Because it's not just about the children, right? It's about the people that are going to be the adults that are going to take care of you when you get old. Well, let's talk about it. Keep it here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back. This phenomenon started in higher education, the article explains. For years, attending American universities, I, referring to the author, have been disturbed to watch colleges fabricate, quote, anxiety and, quote, depression in students who are not mentally ill. Administrators have used grossly exaggerated terms such as trauma and melodramatic expressions such as, quote, I cannot begin to imagine what you have suffered, end quote, to turn into a catastrophe what is best described as disappointment. This creates a culture of victimization.
I'm just sitting here thinking, and I watched a show this weekend, a news show, and it talked about, we know how horrible it was, online schooling was for our children and how it hurt them and how it hurt their mental state and they're so traumatic. Okay. And I'm not saying it didn't, but I'm thinking here of the Great Depression and my parents and grandparents and your grandparents and great-grandparents. I bet that was pretty traumatic to grow up where they shut down schools because you were 8 years old and you had to go get a job because there wasn't enough food on the table. I bet that was pretty traumatic for those people. I'll bet the Great Dust Bowl, also during the Great Depression, when people were thrown off their farms, was a pretty traumatic situation. I'll bet the Civil War was a pretty traumatic situation for kids growing up and watching their brothers and dads and uncles come home from a war or not come home. And then, now I'm the one who has to make things work, be it the son or the daughter of those people. Nobody's saying it's not traumatic, but it seems like now to me, and again, share your opinion with us. Let me know where I'm right, where I'm wrong. But it seems like now it's like we let that be an excuse for behavior Whereas before we said, yeah, it's tough. It sucks. It's bad. Okay. Now what are you going to do about it? Because it's not like people haven't faced trauma before. They haven't faced horrible things happening in their lives before in this country. We're not talking about in third world nations. We're not talking about in poor countries. We have it here. We have horrible things. We have kids who go to bed in the United States without food, without a bed to sleep in. Okay. We have some traumatic experiences going on. Okay. But what are we going to do about that? Number one. But number two, our job is how are we going to help those young people learn to deal with those traumatic experiences? Because trauma is not new. It's always there for young people.
I think we have diluted.
Go mow yards.
We've diluted our sense of fairness. And
shovel snow.
We've done the same thing to trauma.
Rake leaves, make a little bit of money, and you can go buy what you want then. Because there is no Santa Claus. There is no Tooth Fairy. Oh, it's too traumatic. We have to sit here and drink our cocoa. Sorry, I keep interrupting you, but we're going to sit here and drink our cocoa and play games and talk about, oh, it's just so traumatic. You can't do anything. You just need to sit here and we're going to comfort you, and you can have your binky and your blanket, and it's okay that you're 25 and can't face the world because it's a bad place. Right, it is. So get up there and face it. And as you were saying off air, climb the ladder, get back up on the ladder, take another step up. Somebody's going to be above you, kicking you off. But guess what? The way you respond to it is, do you just lay around and take it, or do you get up and try to climb the ladder again?
The dilution, I think, is part of the problem when you dilute something, right? Like fairness. The problem is that then it becomes, when it is important, right? When it really matters whether it's fair or not, then it means less because we use it all the time, right? It's the boy who cried wolf sort of thing. And it's the same situation with trauma. Yes, there are real traumas, right? For example, let's just to use a modern day example. Lance had brought up the, online schooling during a pandemic. If we put that up against, I had to go to school online, or I'm that same young person today and my best friend commits suicide. Well, they're traumatic experiences. Okay, well, we really just devalued one of those experiences quite a lot there, right? We just put two experiences that do not belong in the same universe together. That we could talk about, right, the downside of elevating those experiences that are not trauma to the level of trauma. We can also talk about then how we're hurting people by devaluing real trauma. Because now it just becomes, well, that's just what happens, right? Trauma is just a part of life. Because it also, what else do we know about young people today? They're more pessimistic than previous generations. Well, gee, I wonder why. Because we tell them all the time that they're experiencing trauma, Well, you've been traumatized. And you have anxiety, and you have depression, and on it goes. And I am not, just for people that haven't listened to the show a long time, they should know. I have seen a psychologist. I have had panic attacks, okay? I have lost people to suicide. So I am not making light of any of those things. Quite the opposite. I'm saying there are real issues with those things. But when we elevate them to the everyday, then we delegitimize the real situations where they exist. And then we don't do as good a job of addressing the real ones because everybody gets kind of laissez-faire about, well, yeah, that student's having anxiety just like every other student, so it's probably really not that bad.
There are tens of thousands of students every day before the pandemic and since the pandemic and even today who are getting their education online. You mean they're all traumatized because their parents chose to homeschool them and to put them into an online situation because it's what worked best for them or their family? So they're all traumatized.
The other thing that came to mind as you were speaking, Lance, is confusing niceness, kindness, and toughness. You might say, well, if you're tough, that means you can't be kind. No, that's not what that means. I don't think that that's what it has to mean. I don't think that it has to be right either or. What we do is we hide easiness behind the veil of kindness and niceness, which, again, talking about diluting what we mean, it can be difficult to be kind, right? It can be hard to be genuinely kind. Now, it can be easy to say, well, I'm doing this to take care of them. But are you doing it to take care of them, or are you doing it because it's easier for you? Because those are not the same thing, right? I mean, I think of kindness as it needs to be genuine, right? The reason you're doing it is because it's the best thing to do. It's how to be a good person to another person. Well, let's take the example of children, right? Well, they don't really want to do their homework tonight, so I'm going to be kind to them and not make them do it. I don't think that that's kind. I think that's easier on you because you don't want to put up with having to argue with them or deal with them being upset with you. And so you're taking an easy path out to be kind to yourself.
And then you're setting up your young person for failure.
Because I think teaching kindness is very important. You know, it can't come at the expense of I'm being kind to myself and not to others, right? I'm being kind by taking the easy route for me and not for other people.
Well, looking at the definition, part of the definition of kindness is considerate. Am I being considerate of you when, as a parent, I sit you down and make you finish your homework and sit there and help you with it and learn it? And that can be on any level, right? Maybe I don't understand it. Okay, but I can give you encouragement. Isn't that a type of kindness? I'm telling you, this is something important in your life. Even if it's not the subject matter that's important, the ability to get in there and work on something when you don't want to do it can help you be successful later on down the road.
If our listeners, I think they can get meaning from it either way. But if there's listeners out there who are biblical readers, the very first thing that we get, the number one most related meaning in the Bible is kindness is selflessness, compassionate and merciful. But selfless is the first thing that it is compared to. To be kind, you must be selfless, not selfish.
It's not about you.
Right.
It's not about you.
Kindness is about others, you know? So again, and what I think the point that Lance is making and I was trying to make before that is just do not confuse kindness with being nice in the moment, right? Because kindness really is more of a long-term endeavor. You know, yeah, you can be kind in the moment, but we've talked a lot on this show, especially about productivity. We had that whole episode about we're wired as people to focus on short-term stuff, but we know that we do best when we think about the long term. And if we consider the long term, especially when it comes to our children, we will do them a great kindness by doing what's best for them long term, not just what's easy for us in the short term. But what else is missing? Because we alluded to China intermixing teachings about the state, the party, the country, right? Do we have that in America? Are we really doing that? Well, to find out, keep it here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back. Lance has been referring to falling off the ladder and getting back up on it throughout the show. And I shared with him before, and we'll let our listeners, if you know what this is from, okay, send us an email, podcast@thestateofus.org. I'm going to modify it just a little bit to fit our situation. But if you know what it is, send us the email, podcast@thestateofus.org. The realm. Do you know what the realm is? It's a story we agree to tell each other over and over until we forget that it's a lie. But what do we have left once we abandon the lie? Chaos, a gaping pit to swallow us all? Chaos isn't a pit. Chaos is a ladder. Many who try to climb it fail and never try again. The fall breaks them, and some are given a chance to climb. They refuse. They cling to the realm or to the gods or to love, illusions. Only the ladder is real. The climb is all there is. So the ladder reference there coming into play of, it's almost, you could substitute the ladder for the journey, right? The journey is what there is. Life is what there is. Your journey through life. And you're going to get knocked down. And many people, when they get knocked down, are broken. And why are they broken? Well, I would contend, and I think Lance would contend, one of the main reasons is because we have not given them the tool set as a young person to be prepared as an adult to suffer defeats. I talk frequently about at the Youth Center in Urbana, Lance, we've got this funding from the state of Ohio that I just think is so, I just wish more people were doing this because I think so many don't know that it exists. It's about building resilient young people. That's why you get the money. It's called Capital Youth Resiliency Funds. Okay. And why is that so important? Well, because resilience is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. Toughness. Or it is also known as the ability of a substance or object to spring back. Elasticity. So you literally have your funding, right? Things that build resilient young people. That is, young people that have the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. Notice it in the definition. The very nature of resilience, right, is that you will encounter difficulties. Bad things will happen to you, right? That's the whole point. The point is not, well, how do we avoid difficulty? How do we make sure it doesn't happen? No, the point is they're going to happen. How do we deal with them? How do we move past them, overcome them? How do we become better as a result of those difficulties? And I don't think that we're doing a very good job at teaching that. I think what we're teaching, Lance, is avoidance, right? It's difficult, so just don't do it.
There's a fine line. I'm sitting here thinking the hardest thing that I've ever had to do as a parent is to watch my children suffer pain, and physical pain, but emotional pain. And there was a term used when my daughters were going to college called the helicopter parent. The parents who swoop in to protect their child from the pain. Well, I took a different philosophy, right or wrong, that, okay, you're hurting. How are we going to deal with the hurt? I don't want to watch you hurt. I don't want to see your feelings hurt or for you to be in pain or whatever. But the important thing is, okay, that's going to happen to you in life. This isn't the last time. It's probably not even the worst thing. Your boyfriend breaking up with you when you're 15 is probably not the worst thing that's ever going to happen to you in your life. It is when you're 15. But I can tell you as someone who's older, there are going to be things that happen that hurt you even more. So my job as a parent isn't to protect you from that pain, but to teach you how to deal with it and how to come back from it. And I think about, for me, and I think there's a fine line, okay? My father worked and my mother worked to the point that I played high school sports, but my sport wasn't played in the evening. My sports were played in the afternoon right after school. My parents never saw me play. Not even in college, when I went and played in college. They didn't get to see me play. Why? Well, they had two younger children that they still had to work, and their jobs were, they were professors, they were teachers, so they were still doing their jobs while I was performing my sport. I miss that. I wish they could have been there. And then I look back at my daughters, and my wife and I were in almost every activity they ever did. I'm not sure either one of those are good. There needs to be, there's a line in there somewhere that what's best for kids, that it's learn to handle adversity on your own, but you also have support. And that's what I will say. Even though my parents weren't there, I still had support because they were asking me about it. They would give me, they would, when I would come home at night, how are you doing? They supported me. They bought me new tennis shoes. They got me a new tennis racket. They bought me golf clubs. So they supported me, not always by being there because, what were they doing? They were doing their jobs so that they could give me a roof over my head, so they could help me pay for the college so I didn't have too much debt.
Well, we talked about diluting niceness, but what about diluting toughness? Because I think we say the word tough, but what does tough actually mean, Lance? I put it up here for you. See, what's the actual, just the definition of toughness?
It's the ability to deal with hardship or to cope in difficult situations.
Okay, so nowhere in there does it say be mean to other people.
No.
Okay. Nowhere in there does it say that you have to be, rude or difficult, or doesn't say anything about that, does it?
No.
It just it's in other words, it's an internal thing, right?
Learn
it's not an
to cope
external
with
factor.
difficult situations, right?
Deal with hardship, right? Everybody wants the ability to deal with hardship or to cope in difficult situations.
We don't want hardship.
Right.
We don't want difficult situations, but when they rear their ugly head, we want to be able to deal with it, correct?
And when they rear their ugly head, we often, almost inevitably, do more harm than good by attempting to ignore than to deal with. And I do want to just add this, because for people that haven't listened, they might be listening to this, man, Lance and Justin are really hard on modern society here. I think we're doing a lot of things wrong. I do think that there are positives, okay? I do think that there are some upsides to what our society has done. For example, if we're just comparing to China, the opportunities that women have, far different, okay? Very different. Being openly gay or of anything other than the straight orientation in China, not good.
Well, we're giving opportunities. We're giving much more opportunities to people, particularly in the area of education. I mean, in China, what is it, only 70% of middle school students go on to high school.
That's right.
We're giving you the opportunity. All we're talking about is, are we giving our young people the tools that are necessary to grasp that opportunity and make the most of it? But the opportunity doesn't mean you're going to get it. The opportunity means it's there for you to work towards, and it's going to be a struggle, and it's going to be easier for some people and harder for others. But you have the opportunity. You go to other countries in the world, most other countries in the world, you don't have those opportunities.
It is a crime that we will graduate people from high school who really don't know what it takes to go vote. Great. We're going to make sure that they understand chemistry, but they don't know how to vote. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't understand chemistry necessarily, but I'm saying that conversation needs to be had.
4 years of math, 3 years of science, a semester.
And I think it says a huge portion about what we value in this country. You want to know why patriotism is at the lowest point in recordable history. And what I mean by that is, obviously there was a time where we weren't surveying for it, so we really don't know where it was. But since we started polling for it, well, that's because people don't know anything about their country. It's awfully difficult to love something and to be supportive of something that you don't know anything about. And the few things that you do know come from unreliable social media. The only things they hear are the bad things, many of which are valid, just for what it's worth. I'm not saying that they're not valid points, but they don't learn the whole picture because we don't teach them the whole picture. And then we're surprised that they don't want to go vote, that they don't, want to go out and do service opportunities, that they don't want to be in elected office. And why do they not know that? It's not because they're stupid. It's because nobody ever told them. If you don't like the way things are, be part of the solution. And part of the solution is not standing around and complaining. There are ways to actively make change happen. One semester of civics, and we're surprised that they don't love their country. To the point of the article, right, in China, love of the country in a very distorted way is taught pretty much since the very beginning of their education.
We're not talking about being flag waving and believe everything about our country is great, because it's not. You have to teach both sides of it. So
the whole picture.
We're all about, teach the good with the bad. We've made mistakes. We've done things wrong, but here's how people fought to change it.
Toughness.
And to make, here's how people fought to get rid of slavery, to make equal rights for women, to make equality happen, to get a minimum wage. These are the fights and the struggles that people went through. Teach the bad things, but you do it in the vernacular showing, but there's an opportunity to do good things here as well. Because it's not just about waving the flag and being patriotic. No, it's like when I was growing up, all right, back in the 60s and the early 70s, people would say, a phrase of the conservative was to the hippies, if you don't, love America or leave it. And the response was, no, we don't want to leave it. We love this country. We just want to make it better. And I think that's the message that I want to give people, is that we need to understand the mistakes we've made in the past so that we don't make them again and we can move forward and do more good things. That's the kind of patriotic nationalism that I want, to be honest with ourselves that some things we've done in the past haven't been the right things. And how can we do things better in the future? How can we persevere and continue to grow and be strong and be a world leader and learn from the mistakes of the past?
Humanizing, I think, is huge. Because one of the disservices we do is by putting these people, pretending like some of the greatest people in our history were gods. Were they exceptional people? Yes. I think they were. But at the same time, it's very important to remember they had their faults, right? They were humans. And I think part of what we should be doing is teaching about what did they do to overcome those things, right? If we look at leaders like FDR and Lincoln and Washington and Adams and Jefferson, they all had many shortcomings, many things about them that were not ideal, and some of them that we would find repulsive, But how did they work?
By today's standards.
Right, by today's standards. But how did they, in their time, work to overcome them? And what if we taught that? I think we'd gain a greater respect for those people, not a lesser respect. And one of the byproducts of that is, like we talked about before, a distorted reality of what patriotism is. Lance and I have said many times, patriotism to us is not blindly following, right? It is an active process, and dissent is part of that process. But we're not teaching any of that. And we wonder why, to the point of this article, well, your only assignment is to bring a healthy snack. And in China, you've got the most homework in the first week of school. Now, there is an in-between, right? And it's not one is totally right and one is totally wrong. But the point of the episode is we're doing a great disservice right now. And the rest of the world, they're looking for ways to exploit that. So why do we have this conversation today, Lance?
Well, because here at True Chat, we have a mission. And our mission is to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations. And hopefully you've joined us today because you're listening right now and you share it with other people. That's the whole point of this, okay? We've shared our thoughts and ideas, asked you to share yours with us, but we also ask you to share it with your coworkers and your family. And if they say, well, this sounds like something I'd like to do and I'd like to become part of the conversation, tell them they can find us as a podcast on Spotify, Overcast, Stitcher, Apple Podcast, and everywhere podcasts are found.
The State of Us is available Tuesdays and Thursdays as a podcast and heard on the weekends in select talk radio markets around the country, AM and FM radio stations. For The State of Us on True Chat in Urbana, Ohio, I'm Justin T. Weller.
I'm Lance Jackson.
Special thanks to, I don't know, who had it today, Lance?
That's up to Bradley and the audience to figure out, because I wasn't worried about it.
Okay, you weren't worried about it.
Nope.
Okay.
I had bigger fish to fry today.
Okay.
I'm trying to get Americans to be proud of their country and yet also want to continue to work for change that will make us even better.
I think I had it, but we'll let the audience decide.
That's fine.
We'll let Bradley will make sure. Bradley, you get that squared away.
I'm not always about winning and losing.
I'm Justin T. Weller.
I'm Lance Jackson.
Special thanks to Bradley Butch, producer extraordinaire. And thank you, our audience, for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change. Be sure to check out our website, thestateofus.org, for books, articles, and all the ways to tune in. thestateofus.org.